Can past life and life between life regressions using hypnotherapy help improve our daily lives and situations? Does utilizing past life regression along with life between life regressions give us a better understanding of our divine nature? Do our souls reincarnate multiple times, and if so, why do we reincarnate? Do people bear scars in their present lives from something that occurred in a previous life? Are there things we can expect to experience when we die, such as a type of life review with spiritual guides, and are we part of a soul group? Do we face any type of judgment when we die, or do we really have anything to fear when we pass on? Author and well-known hypnotherapist Dr. Peter Elsin talks with me about these intriguing questions and more.
Okay, so joining me tonight is Dr. Peter Elsin, author of When Souls Awaken, Real-Life Accounts of Past Life and Life Between Life Regressions. Peter was born and educated in the Netherlands and set out on a 20-year journey of self-discovery that brought him into France, India, England, and finally onto the U.S. Peter was a Vedic monk for over 20 years, and after coming to the U.S., utilized his experience as a motivational speaker and background in philosophy and international cultural diversity to launch him into the field of clinical hypnotherapy. In 2014, he received his PhD in transpersonal and spiritual counseling, and he currently focuses on past life and life between life regression sessions. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you on the show joining me. Interesting work, interesting book, and this kind of concept of life between lives and past life regressions is a real fascinating topic to me. I know the story of James Leninger, and that's one fascinating story to me that I read about. And I've had a few other guests on who have kind of delved into this topic as well, and it's quite interesting. But I'm really also interested in what does it mean to be a Vedic monk? Maybe if you could, and I may be pronouncing that wrong, and if I am, I apologize. What exactly does that mean, and what does that involve?
Well, it was a phase in my life. Yeah, your pronunciation is all right, I guess. People call it different ways. In India, they call it Vedic. So Vedic means it's basically based on Vedic philosophy. So Indian philosophy, very traditional philosophy based on Upanishads. It's basically centered, it's very similar to what you can say Tibetan Buddhism is about philosophically. The idea is that though I was using a Oriental tool, you can say, though I'm Dutch, I'm from Europe, the philosophy is very universal. It really means basically that we are all one, that consciousness is the only pervading reality, and that we are basically waves in that ocean of consciousness. And the idea is to realize that. The idea is to gain a personal experience of that state of oneness. And, I think all spiritual aspirants, no matter what tradition they follow, they're all in some way or other trying to achieve that personal experience. And that's basically what I set out to do. My purpose wasn't just to be a monk. That was just a way. I've always been interested in freedom, freedom as a personal experience in a mental, spiritual way. And this was one attempt, which I did for 20 some years, actually more, because before I was into that as well. So an attempt to really, live that. And I still live those principles, though officially from a purely technical standpoint, I'm not a monk now, but I still pursue those same principles, that same search. And so, that's really what it is about.
So is it also kind of about detaching yourself from those material things and material possessions and kind of going into this state of kind of, higher consciousness? So, I mean, you're kind of detaching yourself from the material world to a certain sense. Is that right?
Yeah, well, yes. In that phase, it is. Yeah. Our organization really was doing two things. It was basically an Oriental version of the Franciscans, where we did a lot of service work. So the motto really was like, for your own realization and for the good of the world. So we were very much in education. We had our own hospitals. We did relief work, earthquakes, and a lot of educational projects. So we were very much engaged in service. But the notion was that if you don't really work on yourself, then your instrument will be blunt, right? So the idea was to improve yourself while serving others as well. So we were very contemplative on the one hand, but we were also very actively engaged on the other hand. So, yes, we were detached on a personal level, like we were not married, we had no personal possessions, and so on and so forth. Just like basically any monk in any tradition, there was no difference. The only difference is we did not believe in converting anybody. We respected everybody's inherent culture. So we only served for the sake of love and not for the sake of converting them into our belief system. We don't believe in that.
Interesting. Now, can you also talk about this concept of life between lives?
Yeah, so basically the idea was inspired by Dr. Michael Newton, who wrote his famous books, The Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. And, a lot of people into this search, obviously many people have heard of Michael Newton. He was the pioneer into life between life regression. So traditionally we have the concept of past life regression, big names like Dolores Cannon and so many other famous therapists, even Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, they used hypnotic techniques to regress people back to the past to find the cause of trauma. But Michael Newton, he stumbled upon this notion that it's not just the past life, but what happens after these people die in the past life? Where are they? And so if you believe in the idea of reincarnation, then invariably the question arises, well, what happens between the time you die and before you take up a birth? And is this birth random? Is this birth based on karmic forces? Is it based on the actions we have performed in the past? And so is there then a governing sort of system that would determine in between lives what would constitute a good new life, a new body? And so he kind of started experimenting in this idea with a lot of his clients, and he did thousands and thousands of cases before he even published his books. And he started finding a certain consistency, that there is some sort of world out there in between where perhaps you can say enlightened masters are, there's guides, there could even be family members. And unlike the idea of just a heaven where you go permanently or a hell or anything like that, this idea was that this is a temporary phase. You go there, you learn, and you kind of go over what has happened in your past life and perhaps other lives. Perhaps you will have the idea of seeing multiple lives of all your lives in that interface, and then based on that, with discussion of elders and wise people, and depending on your own soul evolution, perhaps you can do it yourself, it will be, a new life will be organized, looked at different options, different possibilities, and accordingly you choose, not randomly, but based on all these past experiences, you choose a new life. So this is the concept, which is basically a hypnotic technique. We're able to bring people into that state. We kind of, enhance their mind frequencies. And once you're able to allow the mind to move into that frequency, you become aware of some of these states of consciousness.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about this, the process of hypnosis or hypnotherapy. What is it? I mean, why do you feel like it's good for people to undergo this kind of hypnotherapy and kind of tap into past lives? How does that benefit people from your perspective?
Well, we do two things, right? I never do just past life. I used to do just past life, but nowadays I do exclusively the combination of past life and life between life because they're two wings of the same bird. So past life alone, though you can get a lot of information out of that, and surely you can do therapy in past lives also. But the combination with life between life is what's most effective, I believe. What the idea is that if you go back to the past, several things happen. First of all, you detach from the identification of your own personal life right now. I mean, by experientially undergoing a past life, what happens? Suddenly you realize you're not Curry, not just Curry. You're also maybe Ahmed in a different life in Saudi Arabia, and suddenly you realize, oh my God, I'm getting a sense of perspective about my journey. You start discovering that certain tendencies that you have today, which are unexplainable based on just your genetic condition, your environmental conditioning, or your parental influence. Suddenly you find that there's perhaps tendencies within you that are inexplainable, that are not explainable just based on your heritage. It's basically the invisible spectrum. I mean, you have the spectrum of light, but ultraviolet, you cannot see, right? And so doesn't mean it's not there. And so these past lives gives you that invisible spectrum of your past, your causality that makes you who you are today. So going back there, first of all, makes you aware there's more to you. Secondly, you can go back to certain tendencies that have developed in other lifetimes. Not necessarily bad ones. Most of the time when we go back, we find people have experienced incredible lives and undergone incredible sorts of learning in these lifetimes. And so sometimes they have forgotten, or sometimes they need to reintegrate that learning in today's life. And so it's very, very beneficial. Now, life between life is taking that to a whole new level. Now we're going to go after death to a place of life between life. But when you go there, you're not necessarily in a place before this life, because you're entering really in a now time, in a state of higher consciousness. And what happens there for a moment, you start to realize, wait a minute, I'm not neither Curry nor Ahmed, I am actually a divine soul. So this brings your awareness to a whole new level. Suddenly you're not identified with any world, with any body. And suddenly you realize, because when you go into that state, very often it's very blissful, it's very free. You're not really identified with the body. You're not having to worry about making money. You suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm such a beautiful free being. Now that starts then to bring up a whole other set of questions, like, well, why am I in this body, and how come I feel I'm so bound? And so you see, now we're going into something more existential, something more interesting, and then people start to yearn to go back to that state. So when they come back into the body, when they kind of wake up from the session, they suddenly realize, oh my God, that's what I want. I want to be free that way. I want to experience that. So we're also searching for a spiritual experience.
That's interesting. Now, your clients, when they go through a session and after the session is done, do they pretty much have full recall of what happened?
Yeah, you're anything but unconscious, you're actually hyper conscious. A lot of people have romantic ideas about it. They think they're going to be propelled to another universe, or they're going to be somehow completely disconnected from this world, but it's not true. When you go through this kind of hypnotic regression, you're not at all unconscious. You're actually hyper conscious. So you're very much aware while let's say you lay on your bed at home, or you're in my office in a recliner. I do a lot of Skype, so it's also, I do both 50-50 at Skype as well as in person. And when people lay down, let's say on their own bed, and we're having a session, they're very much aware that they're in their own room, that they're in their own body, but in their thoughts, in their mind, it's like, let's say you're thinking back about your childhood, right? let's say there was an emotional event in your childhood, and you're meditating on that event, and it can become very real. You can really feel the emotions. You can really feel what happened, either positively or negatively. Let's say it's a very positive event of great love, a Christmas when you were 10 years old and you got your favorite gift, and you're meditating on that, and you feel the tears running down your face while you're in your room on your bed. Now, are you unconscious at that time? No. You're just daydreaming and going back to that place. And you're very much aware if the doorbell rings, you can hear the doorbell and you get up and interrupt your daydream. So in the same way, we are evoking that memory and that experience while you're just in your bed, like daydreaming. You're not at all unconscious, and you always retain a perfect sense of control and awareness of your environment as well. It's just basically opening up another bandwidth, but not at the expense of your ordinary awareness that is also present. So it's very different than what people think it is.
I wanted to touch on, because this is very Eastern-based philosophy, these kind of teachings. Now, have you found in present day and, maybe in the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years that the Western schools of thought are starting to open up more and more to these kinds of teachings and these beliefs?
Yes, but before we say it's an Eastern thought, you got to be aware that Christianity for at least 324 years accepted reincarnation until the Council of Nicaea, where Constantine at the council declared it anathema, undesirable. But for more than 3 centuries, Christianity, with the Gnostics, the Essenes, and all the mystics, they were very much into reincarnation. It has just been kind of removed, and it has been now kind of shoved under the carpet. But I think with the advent of many Eastern masters that have come this way, also with the common sense of, analysis, we can realize that what we are today is very hard to explain based on just the genetics, just based on environment, just based on your parents. I mean, look at the same family where children from the same genetic stock, the same environmental conditioning, the same parental influence have complete different tendencies. It cannot be explained based on just those factors. So I think a lot of people, when they stumble upon the idea of reincarnation and think it through, say, well, that's not very unreasonable. It's more unreasonable to think that you have been dealt a good or a bad or a good deck of cards randomly. Some people seem to have everything. Some people seem to have nothing. Some seem to face justice, some injustice. If it would be random, that would be more of a shit show to me than it would be based on causality. So I think, first of all, philosophically, I think a lot of people are very intelligent. They think this through. Vast amounts of people do feel an openness to this. But yes, to come to your question, I surely think that when we look ever since back to 60s, the 70s, many of those Eastern gurus and teachings came to the West. A general dissatisfaction with churchology, I think, has opened people up, and they're finding a need for something more, a more comprehensive understanding. And so for a lot of people, it's not even strange anymore. I think this, as much as 25% of the people, I think, are totally open to it. They think it's normal, it's acceptable, even in the US. That's a vast number.
Yeah, I'm kind of, that kind of seems to be the case to me too. I want to talk about this, not only lives between lives, but, reincarnating multiple times. And this idea that this kind of helps advance the soul. Talk a little bit about that from your perspective. Why do you feel like we have to reincarnate multiple times for this kind of soul progression?
Well, an Eastern philosopher explained it very beautifully. I have to go a little bit more into an abstract philosophy, but he describes just two phenomena that are occurring simultaneously. One is evolution and one is manifestation. So the idea is that from a purely spiritual perspective, you could say that everything is innately divine, that right? It's like science. Science says, for example, like matter doesn't exist. Like you and I, we do not really exist as separate physical entities. I mean, this is science 101. So just because you and I see physical objects, it doesn't mean that that's accurate. Because in reality, right now, we're in an ocean of infinite energy, right? Quantum physics is based on this whole notion. And so the philosophers go further. They say, well, okay, if there's just energy, well, where is this energy? Because there's no objects. If there's no object, there's no location. So what holds all of this together? And Schrödinger, I mentioned in my book, When Souls Awaken, he says, well, what holds it all together is consciousness. So the whole notion is that everything is one. It's just conscious. And so some philosophers have said, Eastern philosophers have said, if everything is consciousness, that let's take a simple worm or a simple cell that slowly evolves. But what it does is that the innate nature of a cell is already divine, because at the end of the day, everything is one. It all exists in this one ocean. But it seeks to evolve itself. What it does, it doesn't necessarily evolve consciousness because it's already conscious. But it evolves a vehicle that will allow it to manifest greater degrees of consciousness. So the idea is that everything evolves, and the more evolved the vehicle is, the more it can manifest the innate consciousness. Like a worm is so simple that it cannot, its vehicle is not sophisticated enough to manifest consciousness. But a man is so sophisticated that his brain and its awareness can manifest great degrees of enlightened consciousness because its vehicle is more evolved. So the idea is that evolution perpetuates the manifestation of consciousness, but everything is already innately conscious. So the idea is of reincarnation is that we evolve our vehicle, that we evolve our mind, our brain over many lifetimes so that it can manifest the innate divinity already in man. So nobody is an original sinner. Within us is that light. Within us is that consciousness. And when the vehicle of our mind, our body, is becoming more and more refined, more and more purified, it can manifest the enlightened consciousness. So reincarnation is nothing but that process of evolution so that the innate manifestation can take place. So that's why the whole notion is you are divine, but you're not manifesting it. So you need to evolve your vehicle. You don't need to evolve your soul. Your soul is perfect, but it's not manifesting. So that is a whole novel way of thinking from a Western standpoint. But from Eastern standpoint, this is basically what they consider to be true. I don't know if that's a little abstract, but that's basically, if you want to go philosophical, that's basically how you would, explain the reason behind the notion of reincarnation.
Interesting. Now, I wanted to talk about, and I suppose this is $1 million question because everybody wants to know this, but and it's kind of bears out in, I've had people on here who have been near-death experiencers, and perhaps there's some crossover here into the work you do. But from your perspective, we pass on from this existence. What are some things we can kind of expect from your perspective?
It really depends on your evolution.
I mean, can we expect some sort of, it seems to be a consistent theme with near-death experience. Can we expect some sort of life review? Is that one of the things that you think a lot of people experience when they initially pass on? Is that one of the things that...
I think so, yes. I think so because when we do, for example, life between life regression, there's always a moment when we're going to look back over what just has happened. Because what's the point of all these lives? The point is to learn, right? We're not just randomly living. The point is that no matter what the experience is, at the end of the day, how did this impact our soul evolution? And then based on that, what we have experienced, we take up another birth. And so a live review must always be there, because otherwise, how are we going to look back upon all the events and the learnings we have experienced in that particular life or lifetimes? But not only a review of the past life, but also a preview on what is going to happen in the next life, because these set of circumstances are not random. They are a conscious choice for learning. So both are important, right?
Yeah, I've had other guests of similar conversations, and I've always joked, if it's blissful on the other side, I'm not really sure I want to come back again. But perhaps it is necessary. But I mean, we have some free will here, and I always think, why come back? I mean, once you get on the other side, what is the impetus for making you want to come back here?
I think it's unfulfilled desires, because if the soul is not truly at peace and there's still things it wants to do and it needs to do, those desires will make you come back. You will not be able to stay there, because your own desires will propel you to work those out, because that place is more a place of learning. It's not really a place of working out the desires. And so when the desires are there, they will be lingering even in that place, even in that state. And when you cannot really work them out like you can do here, then you're going to be restless to go back. And so many times, the soul is very eager to go back and take up a life. And then, of course, once you're here, you regret it, right? But that's a different story.
Yeah. You think, I want to be back there again.
Yeah.
Yes. And then this, revisiting past lives, because you already talked kind of about the life between lives. Is that kind of a coping mechanism for people to help them deal with current life issues? How does that kind of help people cope and deal with issues in the present?
You mean whether past life regression is a coping mechanism, or thinking
Yeah, I mean,
past lives?
how does that kind of help us deal with our current life circumstances, going
Well,
and
the
visiting
thing
past
is,
lives?
if you believe that there's only one life, right? That, to me, it makes life more fearful, because, and also more incomprehensible. Because let's just say, you are born in a very challenging situation, and you will wonder, well, how come this is my situation? Where somebody else is born in a very privileged situation. Apparently privileged, right? Because the question really arises, is this so-called privileged life really conducive to spiritual growth? Because it can really lead us to do all kinds of things that we really shouldn't be doing for our spiritual growth. Whereas somebody living a very challenging life may very well learn a million times more things than the one who is living in a privileged life, who's oblivious of struggles of other people, and of humility, and of learning empathy and care for others. So first of all, we need to look at, why is all of this happening? But when you ask me about whether this is a coping mechanism, I think understanding is the greatest coping mechanism. Not understanding why things are happening to me, feeling a victim of circumstances, when in reality, perhaps those very things that I find challenging may be my greatest benefactors in the long run from a spiritual standpoint. That may be the greatest power that I can give myself, by learning to see beyond the apparent. So if I can see the great causality of things, if I could see back as to why I am here now, that I'm not a passive victim, that I am actually a beautiful canvas in progress, and that even my most challenging situations from the perspective of soul growth are actually very good for me, for example. Not that we want to encourage bad situations, that I'm not saying that, but if I had a way of explaining it rather than saying, well, you're just born in this bad situation, bad luck for you, right? To me, I rather think, well, maybe there is a cause as to why I'm taking up this hard challenge. I'm not a victim. I chose the situation because of I have the courage to live through difficulties, because that is what propels my soul to grow further and more quickly. So knowledge is power. It's not a coping mechanism. It's a power. It's an understanding. It will allow me peace of mind. It will allow me the impetus to grow even more and to evolve. And it's the best way to really become responsible for our own behavior. Because at the end of the day, I will be facing the consequences of not living according to laws that help me evolve.
Interesting. Yeah, I wanted to talk about, there's been cases where actual physical scars are believed to have been tied to people's past lives.
Yes.
And I just wanted to ask you, have you had cases where this is bared out? Have you had clients you believe perhaps the physical scars are showing that may trace back to a previous life?
Yes, for sure. I mean, if you go into the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, I think the book is called 20 Remarkable Cases of Reincarnation. I think he has dedicated an entire life to research of these birthmarks and memories in children of their past lives. He has, as much as you can prove things, he has really come very close to proving something intangible based on experiences of children. But for example, my own wife, she has bullet wounds on her back from a past life. And when we did the regression, she actually was shot. She was a scout in the Second World War, and she was shot by the Germans in the back. And even today, she has the shot wounds on her back. And still today, she's suffering pain in her back from that lifetime. Myself, I have experienced. I've always had throat pain ever since I was a kid, unexplainably sensitivity in my throat. And I couldn't understand why until I met this very powerful healer many years ago. And he said, what's up with you? I said, well, I got throat pain. And he started to rub in my throat like this. And he started to rub real hard. And I said, ow. I said, what are you doing? He said, oh my God. He said, it's very old. It's very old. And he said, look. And suddenly he said, you see it? And suddenly in front of me, I saw this 1600s ship from the East India Company, a Dutch ship. And I was on this ship, and we were attacked by pirates, and they were attacking us and slashed my throat. And I saw it in front of me, the bullets and the swords. And he said, and he saw it too. He said, you see it, the ship, all the bullets and everything? And then he kind of rubbed it out. And ever since that day, my throat pain has been 90% less. So and I had many lifetimes after that, but for centuries I carried this scar with me, and I know it from my personal experience. And so, there's many people that I encounter who still carry these scars and these wounds from the past. And I've had many cases where I have seen these hangovers from past lives.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. There's also this idea that we all have spirit guides or spiritual guides. Does everybody have these guides, and how do they interact with us in our daily lives?
I think we do, but not everybody is able to obviously be aware of that. Even in many regressions that I do, we don't always encounter guides, because I have seen plenty of times that a soul is very independent, very advanced, it doesn't even need a guide. So then even when we regress people, though they may be in a very high state, and we are definitely in the life between life, they don't always see guides, because for whatever reason, at that moment there is no need or no reference for any guide. So the soul itself is able to determine these things. But for the many times that we do encounter a guide, there could be one guide, there could be a whole council of guides. Michael Newton describes like the council, which I have seen many, many times in my sessions, where a soul is being presented going together with his or her personal guide, and then goes to the council where they are great loving beings who kind of help the soul understand where they are and what is going on, and give an overview or a certain sense of comfort or advice as to how to proceed. So yes, I've seen it all. I've seen it all. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this notion that time kind of is only understood in this realm. That when you do move on to the afterlife, to that dimension, if you will, that time kind of ceases to exist. But I think I've always been curious. I mean, this life between lives. I mean, maybe it's different for everybody. I mean, we always think in terms of time in this plane, though. So someone who goes and is in a life between life, they're on that other in that other dimension. I mean, is there kind of a time frame in this realm where people are in that state for quite some time before they come back, before they reincarnate, or is it kind of different for everyone?
I think the idea of time is different based on your level of consciousness. I think in the life between life, time seems to be experienced very differently. But I've had many clients that go even further than the notion of life between life, where their soul momentarily becomes unified with the source energy. We can say it's like the drop for a moment merges into the ocean, and that is one of the highest experiences you can have. And that really goes even beyond causality. It goes beyond time and space, and in that state of being, which is very rare, but that's, according to many philosophers and according to many saints, that's the goal, where the drop merges in the ocean of infinity. There's no time, there's no space, it just is, it's one. And so from that perspective, and many my clients I've seen, they actually momentarily touched that realm, and they were in this state of bliss, and they had no idea of how long they were there or what happened. They were just completely spaced out. And so time is a relative concept to your state of consciousness. Yeah, the more you are in duality, the more time is a reality. And the more you're in infinity, the less time, becomes relevant. So depending on your state of evolution, your state of mind, so time unfolds.
And there's also this concept of having a soul group. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, if you have any understanding of, do we all belong to soul groups? If you have kind of a sense of that.
Well, from all the many sessions I've had, it seems that yes, we do seem to have soul groups, very much so. And that's maybe explained with the many people that you find in NDAs, near-death experiences, where they meet their group, their family is waiting for them, and which is often a group. And they're basically souls that travel together through many lifetimes, who have similar tendencies, similar interests in learning, similar talents. And it's not necessarily a family. It could be people that are sometimes not incarnating with you in any particular life, but they are all souls that kind of cluster together for whatever particular reasons. And this is very common in the life between life experience. Again, not everybody, when we do the session, necessarily meets their group, because there's many reasons why during a session, many things that can happen during a session that are perhaps more important for a particular soul at that time. To rather than meeting the group, they may meet a guide, or they may just move into infinity for a while. So, but it's very common. It's very common for people to connect to their group.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I find interesting is there's, in part, perhaps a lot of this is religious based, but this kind of fear aspect of, when we die, what is going to happen? Will I face judgment? I mean, from your perspective, is there any sort of kind of hellish state for individuals once they pass on?
Well, from my perspective of life between life sessions, which I have done hundreds, if not thousands, I've never seen that. Yeah, judgment is not something that is of the nature of divinity, right? I mean, the whole notion is that you are divine, your essence is divine. That doesn't mean you cannot cover it up with a lot of bad karma. And so the thicker the karma, the less manifestation of divine awareness will be there. But think of it this way, would those people really come to see me to do a session? I mean, if somebody is that bad and has so much bad karma, they most probably wouldn't even come and visit me for a session. So I mostly have 99.9% of really nice people coming to me who are truly seekers, who are very pure-hearted, lovable people. And so I have nothing but good experience. Once in a while you get a crazy person, but that's really rare. I mean, 99% of my people I meet, they're just the most beautiful people. So I don't see it there. But then if you go in the concept of the Buddhist philosophy, for example, they talk about the bardos, the different levels that you can experience afterlife based on your current state of evolution. I would only say that it's possible that when the karma is really bad, because there are people doing really bad things. I mean, let's not be naive, right? I mean, when you look around in the world, there's plenty of people doing weird stuff. And so, they themselves will be suffering the consequences of that. In another word, is when you ascend after life with that kind of karmic debt, it's not that there will be necessarily a judgment, but there will be a terrible becoming aware kind of a state where you see what you have done. So it's not about punishment, it's about becoming aware of, my goodness, what have I brought in motion? And now I'm going to have to relive that, re-experience that, and learn to undo all of that karma that I have, accumulated, and the pain that I have caused. So let's say you meet a great saint. Would this saint be judgmental? I think the saint would try to make you understand and change your ways. If the saint wouldn't judge you, the saint wouldn't be ignorant of what you have done either. But the only thing that can really help somebody is to become aware of what they have brought in motion. And I think in that life between life, when we talk about that overview, it will be a very painful overview, because at that moment they will be momentarily detached from the life they have lived, and they will be able to stand back and see that very dark movie play in front of them, and feel the shame and the pain and the hurt that they have caused. And so the beauty is that this person is going to have to face that.
Yeah, so it's kind of the notion that you kind of create your own hell in a sense. Is that
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but it's not permanent, because you will come back and learn. And the idea of always feeling guilty is not required, because it's about learning. It's about progressing, and to know that innately you are divine. You're not a sinner, you're divine innately. And that it is about manifesting that divinity. And the pain that we have caused is there to learn, to teach us that, don't do that, because not only, of course, do you bring pain to others, but you will cover up your own divinity by bad karma. And so you will be more in darkness and more unhappy. And so rather forgive yourself and get over it, and change and improve yourself, so that you yourself may feel a more happy state of being. You're your own laboratory, you're your own testing ground, and as you think, as you live, so you will feel within yourself. Nobody can hide that. You cannot hide it from yourself. And so it's twofold, right? On the one hand, you're going to have to reap the result of your bad karmas in the world, but on the other hand, you also feel the lack of inner joy because of it. So it's a double whammy that you're going to be experiencing. But on the other hand, you have the power to change. You have the power to improve and to shed that bad karma and to bring positive forces into motion. And accordingly, not only do you bring good into the world, but you also start to experience within yourself that happiness and that joy. And that, at the end of the day, is the best measuring stick.
Yeah, and that's what's encouraging to me when I have guests like you on the show. We have these conversations. I think there's a lot of people fearing what awaits them on the other side, maybe because of things they've done on this end, and that fear of judgment, and perhaps that's kind of traditional religious-based teachings that maybe bring that comes into play. But the encouraging thing is we learn from our experiences in this, and we can also come back and do it better, perhaps the next time.
Yeah, the idea is do not fear, but be responsible. There's no need to fear judgment. Rather, let those mistakes be an incentive to do better, to be better, to love more, and be grateful for the mistakes you've made, because those have made you aware. Even if you have done a heinous crime and sin, still that is something that has made you hyper aware of the misery that it has brought upon you and upon others. And as a result, each, the law of motion, every action is a reaction, opposite and equal and opposite, but also it will propel you in an equal and opposite way to do good. So in that way, we could say from a bigger perspective, perhaps that very thing that is what you call a sin has what's made you a saint. So the notion is do not fear, but do not repeat it either, and let that be the incentive to love and to care.
Yeah, one of the things I always like to do on this show is kind of address the the proverbial skeptics in the room. There's, I had a guest on a while back that, this whole higher level of consciousness outside the brain is really not something they subscribe to. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that don't. Do you have cases, and I already mentioned the case of James Linenger. It's a famous case, and it's one where, you have to look back in the case and say, how on earth would a 2 or 3-year-old be able to recall those kinds of things about his past life, about being a World War II pilot? Have you had your own cases where you've actually went back after what the client has recalled saying happened in past lives, and you've actually been independently able to verify that through research? Have you had cases like that?
Well, I'm not going to research anybody else. I'm not a researcher. I'm more interested personally. There's many different types of therapists based on their personal history. Like Michael Newton was a real researcher, right? I am more interested personally in allowing people to experience their soul potential. So that bliss of the higher state of consciousness. That's what I'm really about, and my sessions are more about that. I'm not going with the client into endless research, and even when we do the life between life session, I'm not really asking a million questions just to learn more about what's going on in the life between life sphere. For me, it's more helping them to experience the bliss of their own divine nature. That's what I'm about, because to me personally, that's what matters. But it's my opinion, not my opinion. It's what I care about, and it's highly subjective. And I will not say that oh my God, that is the best thing or the only way. So that is just how I work, and people tend to gravitate towards me that care about that as well, based on my book that they read, for example, When Souls Awaken. And so for me, that's just, I'm not a researcher, but I can tell you from my personal experience, right? I remembered as a kid many of my past lives. And in this life, I actually ended up in many of those places of my past life. And I recognized it, and I had a great affinity for certain places. And I knew at that moment, this is where I was in my past life. So can I prove that? No. But do I know it for myself to be true? Yes. You see, you can argue, right? When it comes to a skeptic, if somebody wants to be a skeptic, it's fine with me. I have no argument with them. It's fine. But what is interesting to me is my personal understanding about how I fit together, what my story is, my personal understanding, and particularly how is it helping me to come to a more happy place. Right? So research for me is not something that brings me personally to a happier state. For me, it's the mystical experience that I'm after, a state of consciousness that I can experience. And if I, through my work, can help people touch that divine state for even 1 minute, right? It has huge implications in their personal life, because they will always remember that bliss, and they say, my God, is that my potential? Oh my God, what can I do in my life to change my habits and my ways and my meditations to regain that bliss? And not only afterlife, but here and now. Can I come to a place of being where now I can feel that bliss? You don't have to die for that, right? Many saints have experienced moments of years or lifetimes of divine bliss. That to me is interesting. Can I do that? Can I help other people do that? And it depends on whatever degree you're prepared. So for me, I'm not into research. To me, it's pretty clear that this is the way it operates, and I don't need to go and prove that to anybody. I don't try to research my clients either. So I'm all about experience. That's just my way of going about this.
So I think some are interested in finding out how we can perhaps personally tap into these higher levels of consciousness, and aside from going and seeing someone who does the hypnotherapy sessions like you do, what other things can we do to kind of try and help achieve that enlightenment, if you will?
Well, I really like your questions, by the way. I mean, I've done many interviews, but you're the one that's going more into the philosophical side of things, which is what I personally like. So first of all, I really thank you for all your good questions. It really depends, right? Again, there's no one way, because everybody comes from a different tradition. Whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or a yogi, everybody has their own way. And I'm always a fan of stay within your own tradition. There have been millions of great Christian saints, there have been great Buddhist saints, there have been great Hindu saints. And so first of all, ask yourself, what's my path? What tradition do I feel affinity with? Because that's the road of least resistance. And then there is, of course, different ways within that tradition to make progress. What I see always in the sessions is what the guides always tell everybody: meditate, 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 meditate. This is what the lesson that you get, because meditation is that where you detach momentarily from all the noise of your day-to-day life, and you dive deep within. And the idea is, in yoga, they have a beautiful saying, right? If you go in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, I think it's the second chapter, I think it's the second or first verse, whatever, it says, what is yoga? It says, in Sanskrit, it's yoga chitta vritti nirodha. It means yoga is the cessation of the waves of the mind. So the hypnotherapy is based on this concept. So our mind is in a certain frequency. Right now, it's in a beta wave. It's a very restless, active wave. And this restless wave is preventing us from seeing and feeling the light that is within. It's like we're blocking our own inner light. And meditation is where you start to alter this frequency. So yoga is the cessation of the waves of the mind. If you have a way of reducing the noise in your head, if you have a way of calming down those waves in your mind, then what happens? Then the light within is able to shine through. Now it's a fog of thoughts that inhibits you from seeing through the fog. But the light is not coming from outside, it's coming from inside. And so the secret, and that's what we do with hypnotherapy, we alter or improve your brain frequency. So we calm it down. We go from beta to alpha to theta. And in theta, that veil is becoming really thin. And that's how you're able to connect to higher consciousness, both around you as within you. You're able to see guides around you, but you also feel the divinity that you are manifesting from within yourself. And so the secret is to work with those brain waves. There's many ways of doing that. Each tradition has their own ways. I think the Orientals are a little bit more scientific about that. But the Christians have beautiful methods of prayer, of meditation, of group awareness and group prayer. And how many Christian saints have there been? Tremendous saints. So I think there's ways and traditions and cultures that can help us calm those brain waves down. And that is for each individual to find out, what is, but you have to be scientific about it. You have to understand the nature, what it is that I need to do, and that's working with the mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I had a thought as you were talking about that, about this notion of Akashic Records. Now, I'm guessing as we get into these, perhaps theta waves, brain waves or states, if you will, that we're able to more easily access that. But can you talk about kind of that concept of the Akashic Records? I know it's talked about a lot in these kinds of discussions.
Yeah. Well, Akashic Records, I think you can look at it perhaps in two ways. One are your own records, right? Your own astral history. And then there is a collective astral history. I think it's very rare to be able to tap into the collective Akashic Records. I mean, you have Edgar Cayce and those people, the great mystics who are able to tap into that. But to do it as an individual, I mean, it requires a very special mind, During my work, I basically help people tap in their own records. And what are those records? Those are the astral memories of your past. Now, where are they? I mean, when you die in a past life, and if you are a believer in reincarnation, then obviously your body in that life will be gone, right? There is no body. It's cremated or buried or eaten by maggots. There's nothing left of your body. So, but it takes time before you take up a new body. So where are those impressions of that past life? And so the notion is that it is wrapped around the soul. It's not the soul that is affected. It's like you have a body. Now you have a body. The body is not your soul, right? The body is just body. But in between your body and your soul, there is a subtle body, an astral body. And this astral body always travels with you until it is becoming so purified that it falls off and your soul is released into the ocean of infinity. And the goal of reincarnation is to purify this astral body so that the impressions get so thinned out, so become so clear that eventually the soul is able to manifest through this astral body, and the astral body simply falls away. And all the karmas have worked out. The astral body is the karmas. It's the impressions of your past life. And that is what we can say an individual Akashic record. It contains all the memories and all the experiences of your past. And when you ascend, you are seeing the infinite ocean through this veil, through this Akashic record. You can see the ocean, but it's colored by your experiences. And life between life regression is nothing but making contact with that astral history. So, but when you ask about an Akashic record, it would be more something that contains the entire history of man. And, it is very rare to tap into that. I mean, I've had some clients who, when you ask some of the bigger questions, they're able to answer. But what Edgar Cayce does, I mean, that is a whole different level of mystic, right? I mean, that's not something that I see on a day-to-day basis, you know. Maybe 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 persons that
Wow,
has that capability, if not even less. But
interesting.
there are some extraordinary people that I've seen, but it's still rare. Even that's rare. I mean, I cannot tell you with any sort of from personal experience that somebody really, in some unrestrained way, is able to access that. I have not seen that. It doesn't mean it's not possible. I'm a total believer that it's possible.
Yeah, well, hey, Peter, it's been a very fascinating discussion, intriguing stuff. I really love talking about this stuff. Uh, the book, again, is When Souls Awaken. Where do people find your work? How do they schedule sessions with you if they want to? And all those sorts of things.
The book is available on Amazon. When Souls Awaken, real life experiences, real life accounts of past life and life between life experiences. It's available in print book. It's available in Kindle, and very popular. It's also available as an audiobook. It's also translated in Spanish, by the way. So that is all on Amazon, exclusively there. If you want to schedule a session, then you have to go to my website, Elsin, ELSEN, hypnotherapy.com, or you can also go to whensoulsawaken.com. Either way, you can set up a session, and I'll be more than happy to, work with anybody who is sincerely interested.
Very good. Well, thanks again, Peter, for joining me tonight. Really enjoyed the discussion, and best of luck to you and all your future endeavors and the work you do.
Thank you, and thank you for contacting me. It was a joy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great. Have a great night.
Okay, big thanks to Dr. Peter Elsin for joining me for that interview. I really thought that was quite an intriguing discussion, and I really hope you enjoyed that one. Really hope 2021 rings in a great new year for you. And if you are tuning into the show via the Passion for the Paranormal YouTube channel, please just make sure you hit that subscribe button, and don't forget the little bell there. Make sure you hit that as well, because that'll key you in when new episodes drop. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to the show, and Happy New Year, everybody.